Welcome to Instruction Discussion, our weekly look at the latest topics and trends in education affecting schools here on Long Island and schools around the world. Whether you're a teacher, parent, or student, listen for tips and strategies to help you navigate the educational landscape. There's a bell. It's time to start today's Instruction Discussion on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Hello, I'm Kevin Boston Hill, and welcome to Instruction Discussion, where each week we will examine a recent trend or development in education and its impact on Long Island. When it comes to the job market, one thing the pandemic has shown us is that people have different motivations when it comes to work. With the growing number of people leaving their jobs in favor of a better work-life balance, it is clear employees are in the driver's seat when it comes to employment. Additionally, many people have begun upskilling and taking additional courses, something we have discussed on this show in the past, to better prepare themselves for a new work environment. Add to that the fact that we now have a new group of graduates about to hit the marketplace, and we see the need for a new type of worker taking place. With all these people looking to showcase their new skills, the job search can seem like a daunting process. Most people know about job listing sites like Indeed and ZipRecruiter, and millions of people, almost 1 billion now, have joined LinkedIn, but few of them know how to truly maximize the power of these digital sites. This is where our guest, Jeremy Schieffeling, comes in. Along with his partner, Omar Garriott, they are the creators of the website, thejobinsiders.com. And they are career coaches and hiring managers who ran LinkedIn's education team. Additionally, Jeremy is a co-author of the book, Linked: Conquer LinkedIn, Get the Job, Own Your Future. He joins us today not only to share some of the insider secrets, but to give his insights on the future of the job market and job seeking. Let's welcome Jeremy Schieffeling to Instruction Discussion on 90.3 WHPC.
Thanks for having me, Kevin. It's great to be here.
Oh, again, it's my pleasure to have you here. I know, again, this is such a timely topic and something that we should be talking about ad infinitum to get people really to kind of demystify the process, if you will, because it has changed so much over the years. So let me get into some of the questions and kind of just pick your brain a little bit. So before we do, tell us how you got involved with the LinkedIn's education marketing division and how can that really help our job seekers?
Yeah, so it's an actually interesting story because I started out as a kindergarten teacher in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. And I had always dreamed of doing something in technology. You know, I was teaching my kids back in the day how to make MP3s, how to make PowerPoints. And so having a chance to bring those passions together, education and technology, LinkedIn was the perfect place. Because back then, LinkedIn had just IPO'd and they were known really well by recruiters and salespeople and CEOs, but not well at all by students. And yet, in some ways, it's the most important platform for a student starting their career because it's the best way to break into a new industry, to learn from alumni, and get that awesome first job. And so ever since then, I've been so passionate about helping open those doors to the next generation of talent seekers. And I'm thrilled to be on the show today.
There's this trend now that some people have discovered called the Great Resignation. So can you describe for us what that trend actually is and how job seekers currently can take advantage of it?
Yeah. So I think, dating back years and decades, people have been frustrated with dead-end jobs. You have shows like The Office, comic strips like Dilbert, talking about the frustration of modern work. And then along comes the pandemic, and all of a sudden, everything is topsy-turvy. We're stuck at home. We're working from home for the first time. A lot of times we're stuck with our kids running around behind us while we're on Zoom. And we think to ourselves, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better life for me. And I think that was just the jolt that people needed to think about, hey, how do I prioritize what really matters to me in my career and my life? And maybe that means leaving for greener pastures. And that was the beginning of the Great Resignation.
And I guess how can now our current job seekers, those who are either just graduating or even people who may be changing careers, how can they now take advantage of that vacancy that has been left behind?
Yeah, such a great point, because every time someone walks off the job, they're cracking that door open a little bit wider for the person who walks in behind them. And so that's great news for career changers, for new grads. And I think it all starts with focus. Whether it's your first job or your 10th job, you got to know what your North Star is. And I see a lot of people go on LinkedIn and they say, I'm looking for a job, or I'm currently a student. And the problem is there's no recruiter in the world who's searching for those things, just a generic candidate. They want someone who can do a specific job, a project manager or an accountant or an analyst. So the first thing we do on LinkedIn is reach out to people who are maybe alumni of your same school, classmates, learn from their experience, get a sense of what they do all day. And if you can find a job that sounds really meaningful to you, really pursue it and bake that into what you express on your LinkedIn profile.
And you mentioned something there that we're going to get into in a moment. And I think, and that's about the building that network, because you're talking about reaching out to people that, whether they're current professors or other people that you know. We're going to get into that in a moment, how people can really do that on LinkedIn. But before I do, talk a little bit about that search algorithm that LinkedIn kind of prioritizes over everything else. So how can people really tap into that?
Yeah. So the first thing that people don't necessarily understand about LinkedIn is there's two sides to the site. So it's not just job seekers like ourselves going out there and applying. It's the recruiters on the other side of the screen who are searching for us at the same time. And so whenever a recruiter goes to LinkedIn and says, show me an accountant who has QuickBooks skills and bookkeeping skills, the algorithm instantly scans through 800 million profiles to find people with the matching terms on their profiles. And so it's incumbent upon job seekers, whether you're brand new to your career or you're mid-career, to understand those keywords that are important for your industry and get them onto your profile.
And so how can somebody discover what those key terms are? Where is there a particular book they get a particular book they can go to find out the information, or can they go to the local library? How can they find out what those key terms for their industry are?
Yeah, so I've got a great hack for your listeners, which is if you go to another website called jobscan.co, what you can do is you can scan all your dream jobs as well as your LinkedIn profile, and you can do a matching analysis and say, hey, what are the most important keywords across my industry? And then specifically, which ones am I missing? Because that's what I've got to work on. That's what I've got to start to bake in there. And so if you can get that list and you can optimize your profile, you are off to the races.
And what was that website one more time?
So that's jobscan.co. And just like everything I'm sharing today, it is free to use.
Oh, that's the operative word there. key price point, free.
Okay. That's right.
And I know that, and this is something that has been going on for years, and not just with the job industry, but overall in whatever website that you may go to, whether it's Amazon or anything like that, there are these key terms that are searched for. But now when we think about it in the job seeking industry, there's this thing called an ATS, or an applicant tracking system. Talk to us a little bit about what that is and how it works, because I think most people would be interested to know that 70% of the resumes that are initially reviewed aren't even reviewed by real people. They go through this system that are reviewed by robots before they even get to, or if they get to, a real person. So let's talk about that a little bit.
And so it sounds really scary because you hear about ATS. It sounds like it's out of Star Wars or something. But the reality is it's just like the algorithm on LinkedIn, which is trying to save work for recruiters. So imagine yourself in the recruiter's shoes. You've got 1,000 resumes in front of you. Do you really want to ruin your nights and your weekends reading through those? No way. You say, let the technology do what it's good at, which is that initial screen, scouring all of those resumes for the right words, the right signifiers of quality. If you've got enough of them, you're in, and I'll read your resume in person. But if you don't have those, you're out of here, and better luck next time. So again, just like with your LinkedIn profile, understand the keywords from your job descriptions, get them right into your resume, and get past that ATS.
Other than going on to the website you just mentioned before, is there a way that they can, or anyone they can reach out to kind of help them review or format their resume so that it actually works the way it's supposed to?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that, because this is like the best thing you can do early on in your career exploration process is don't just start applying for jobs willy-nilly. Instead, step back and really reach out to people who are in those dream companies, in that dream industry, to learn from their experience. So let's say, for instance, you want a job at Google. Everyone always wants a job at Google. Well, guess what? There are lots of Googlers who went to Nassau Community College or went to Hempstead University or went to any of these places. And if you reach out to them, they're going to be happy to chat with you as a current student or as a fellow alum and share their insider perspective. And then once you've built this rapport, you could say, hey, I'm ready to follow in your footsteps. I've got my perfect Google resume ready. would you mind looking at it before I submit it? Just because you know what it actually takes to get in. And then you've got those real human eyes giving you direct feedback.
I think that's really important to understand that that's kind of where this whole idea of networking really begins. It begins with the people that you know, and then, or people that have some type of connection with you, and you cultivate that relationship before you kind of just spring stuff on them, because that's another danger I'm sure that people are going to do. They're going to have that resume in hand and just think that just because I now have your email address or your cell phone number, I can just go ahead and zip this over to you and can you take a look at it. But there's a process of building that relationship first before you just give them work to do for you.
Yeah, that's the dark side of the technology, is it almost makes things seem too easy. Like, oh, I can click on this button to connect with someone, therefore they're going to do my bidding. No. At the end of the day, even if it's all pixels on the screen, there are real humans behind that. And so just like the way you would treat someone well in person, getting to know them, asking them really good questions, you want to do the same with any alum, any insider, where you give them a chance to tell their story before you ask for anything else.
It's funny that you use that term insider, because I think that's the name of your website. And
right.
the jobinsiders.com. So talk to us a little bit about what was the motivation behind doing that? And kind of, did you do that while you were still at LinkedIn, or did you leave LinkedIn first and develop it? So what was the motivations behind developing that website?
Yeah, so I think it really came from our time at LinkedIn. And so even though it didn't start until afterwards, that seed was planted of, hey, there's got to be a better way to help new grads, career changers. Everyone is stuck in their career somewhere to break on through. And we do feel like a lot of this insider expertise shouldn't be kept behind locked doors. Everyone deserves to hear this. And so we really want to make sure that we democratize that access as much as possible.
How does LinkedIn fit into becoming this great opportunity democratizer? And therefore, how can people really use it to its utmost potential?
Yeah. And I think this goes back to the fact that, like, even as recently as 20 or 30 years ago, our economy was largely an old boys network, right? We've all heard the stories of, like, you had to go to the right schools, know the right people to get the best jobs. And so now the nice thing is everybody's on LinkedIn, not just the old boys, but the new boys, people who aren't boys, everybody is there. And it doesn't matter where you went to school or what you studied, so long as you get on there and you reach out and you build those bonds, because there are ways to connect with pretty much anyone on LinkedIn, whether it's, hey, you and I know someone in common, or you and I volunteer with the same nonprofit, or you and I have the same passions. Leverage those similarities to reach out, build your own network, and don't get stuck in the past when you said, oh, I can't do this because I wasn't part of that old boys club.
You are listening to Instruction Discussion on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Kevin Boston Hill, and our guest today is career coach and hiring manager, Jeremy Schieffeling, author of the book, Linked, Conquer LinkedIn, Get the Job, and Own Your Future. So let's talk a little bit about the whole, I guess, referral process that LinkedIn has, because we know that's one of the main selling points of LinkedIn, or why people go there in the first place, because they can get these, I guess, instant referrals from people who are on the site as well. How can people really, truly, and effectively understand what that referral system is and how to properly network in order to get those referrals for them?
Yeah. So first of all, got to do a little empathy. You got to understand what it feels like to be a hiring manager inside a company where you're deluged with all these applications. And so you're like, oh my goodness, how are we going to get through all of this? And then there's kind of this like bright light from heaven shining down saying, dun, da, da, da. Here is someone who's not just a random stranger, but someone inside my organization who I already know and trust is vouching for them. They're saying, I know Kevin and Kevin is awesome. To me, that's manna from heaven, because now I don't have to read through all these applications. They're all strangers to me. Instead, I can go with a friend of a friend. And we all know that at the end of the day, what we value most as humans is that circle of trust. Those people that we know and the people they know are the people that we ultimately are going to rely upon. And so the data backs us up. If you apply for a job and all you do is drop your application online, you are still a stranger and you have less than a 1% chance on average of getting hired. But if you take that single simple application and attach a referral to it, someone going to bat for you inside the organization, you have now increased your chances of being hired 10x. So really, it's a simple equation. Do you want a better odds or worse odds? I know what I would like.
Of course, everybody wants to get that 10 times odds in their favor. So again, how can people therefore look into getting those referrals? Should they kind of just scour through the different profiles and say, okay, I like this person, so I'm going to reach out to them? Or how can they get to know people who can, within a particular company, who may want to give them referrals without tipping off the hiring manager?
Sure. And so just to be really explicit about it, let's go back to our Google example. So at Google, where I used to work, pretty much the only way in was you had to get referred. That was so critical there. So what I would do is I would go to the Google page on LinkedIn. I would click on this little link that says there are 250,000 Googlers in the company. And then LinkedIn will generate an employee directory that shows me all those Googlers, all those potential referrers. And now I start to slice and dice. I say, you know what? I don't want to reach out to total randos. I'm going to go to people who are low-hanging fruit for me. So people who know someone that I know, who went to my same school, who maybe worked at the same organizations I used to work at. And so when I reach out, that email already writes itself because it says, hey, as a fellow Wolverine or as a fellow fan of Habitat for Humanity or whatever it might be, I'd love to connect with you based on our shared interests. And then they say, okay, I'll chat with you for a little bit, Jeremy. We've got that in common. And now over the course of that conversation, they're telling me their story, how they got into Google. And then I pivot and say, you know what? I've heard that the only way into Google is through a referral. Everything you've shared with me is like pure gold, and I could love nothing more than to follow in your footsteps. Would you ever be willing to give me a referral? And at that point, after you've shared what you have in common, given them a chance to tell their story, built that rapport, it's hard for anyone to say no to that.
Those are the gold nuggets right there for any job seeker. I mean, the way you just laid it out step by step, I'm sure there are a lot of people. I mean, I was taking some notes. So I'm sure a lot of other people, our listeners, will also be taking notes on that particular process, because it seems that's simple. It's very simple to do that. And yes, there is some legwork that's involved. It's not just, like I said, it's not just a matter of pressing a button here and sending off a resume. You have to do a little bit of legwork ahead of time in order to get yourself in the position to be able to hit that button and send off your resumes.
Yeah. And I think that's important because I want to make sure that people understand this is not a silver bullet. This is not like, click the easy button at Staples and everything is magical. But in fact, the legwork is what's going to separate you. Because think about all those other job seekers, all of your competitors. They're not putting in the legwork. They just want to do the easy thing of apply online and be done. And so just the simple act of going one step further already separates you from the pack.
Let me ask you about this, this hidden job market, so to speak, because we know that there's the jobs that are posted that we all see and everything, everybody rushes to. But then there are some that aren't really posted that we hear. So how did you get that job? And I didn't see that posting and so forth. So what is this hidden job market and how can job seekers kind of get involved in that and get a leg up?
Yeah, it sounds mysterious, right? Like there's some underground black market in jobs or something. It's a really simple phenomenon that goes back to the relationships piece, which is, again, if you want to save time as a hiring team and you don't want to go through a million sort of hoops to hire people, well, guess what? You could say, you know what? I already know 5 people who'd be awesome for this job. Why not approach them and see if they're interested before we waste a single second posting the job, interviewing candidates, all of that song and dance. And that's why so many jobs never get posted, because we just end up hiring from our existing networks. And the way, of course, you get access is that you plug yourself into those networks as soon as possible.
Oh, wow. That's really good information to have. So what are some of the common recruiter filters and how do people get past them?
So the first couple of filters are the ones we've already talked about in terms of, do you even have the right keywords? But then think about this. Recruiters on LinkedIn have a lot of power, but they don't have a lot of in-mails. And an in-mail is basically a way for a recruiter to reach out to candidates right through LinkedIn's communication platform. And LinkedIn artificially limits that because they don't want people getting spammed all over the place. So let's say you have like 30 in-mails a month as a recruiter. And now you're down to your last message for the month, and you've got 2 strong candidates. So question for you, Kevin. If you had one candidate who is raising their hand and saying, hey, I'm in the game, come and get me, I want a new job, and another candidate who is sitting on the sidelines, and you had no clue what their intentions are, who would you prefer?
Oh, I'm going for the one who's in the game, who's enthusiastic and wants to actually be part of it, of course.
Exactly. And so that's like this basic idea that recruiters can't waste a single scarce email on people who are just mysterious. So if you don't want to be mysterious, if you want to be crystal clear about your intentions, you can go to your profile. You can turn on what is essentially a bat signal for recruiters. It's called Open to Work. And it basically says, hey, you want someone awesome with my talent? Guess what? I'm open for business. Come and get me. And that single little signal will get you filtered into the recruiter search versus filtered out.
You know, I've just been put on to that little bat signal, as you call it. And as a result, I've gotten a lot of inquiries just from that,
Wow.
from that little thing itself. It's amazing how that one little change can make such a big difference. And since we're talking about that, what are some of the other things that people should be including in their LinkedIn profiles? And what are some things they should avoid?
So another big thing is that recruiters are really drawn by visual imagery. So we've talked a lot about the algorithm, right? And of course, the algorithm is only focused on text. It could care less about whether you have a beautiful photo or no photo. But we as human beings, like we're very biased towards, oh, that's a really smiling face or a friendly background or whatever. So number one, recruiters are 13 times more likely to choose your profile if you have a photo. So you got to have a photo up there. No being anonymous, lurking in the shadows. And number two is don't forget about the background behind you on LinkedIn called your cover photo. A lot of times people just have this gray or blue generic background, which is a waste of that prime real estate. Instead, go to a site like pexels.com where you can download beautiful royalty-free photography, and it could be totally on brand for you. So for example, if you're that accountant we were talking about, maybe you have this gorgeous ledger listed behind you. So the minute the recruiter lands on your profile, they say, aha, I'm looking for someone who has an expertise in this area. This is my person. Okay.
So I think that's amazing. And what are a couple of the things that people should avoid as far as building their profiles? Or is there anything?
Yeah. So there's one big trap that I've seen a lot of people fall into, which is endorsements. So endorsements, if you've ever been asked, hey, does Kevin have good skills when it comes to public speaking? Or, can people endorse you for this or for that? Well, it seems like a great idea in theory. In practice, it's kind of like a Wild West. So for example, when the product first came out about a decade ago, my own mother was endorsing me for everything from astronomy to zoology, two things I know nothing about. And so even 10 years later, the signal is just not credible enough to recruiters. They know it's a big mess. But what matters a lot more is a recommendation. If someone says, hey, Kevin was the best radio host I ever had, he brought twice as many listeners to our station, that matters a lot to me as a recruiter because that's third-party validation that you're as awesome as you claim.
And I think that's really important for people to understand because like you said, a few years ago when it first came out, people were asking me for endorsements. Will you endorse them in this and this and that? And I saw other people say, well, you should request endorsements from other people as well. And I was like, well, what's the real purpose behind it? I mean, does it really help my cause? And now hearing it, I think, like you said, I think the recommendation is a little bit better because now it gets more specific and it gets right to the heart of the matter as far as what your particular skill set is.
Exactly right.
As a career coach and a recruiter yourself, what do you see as the future of job acquisition from the perspective of the employer as well as the employee?
So first of all, on the employer side, and I love this question, I think that we're heading into an even more competitive labor market. There are certain skill sets that involve technology, cybersecurity, all these things are going to be so big in the 21st century. And the demand is going to vastly outstrip the supply. So recruiters are going to have to work harder and harder to find the right candidates using tools like LinkedIn, even the next LinkedIn, whatever that will be. There's going to be something that's going to help recruiters instantly figure out, hey, these are the best people in the world at the skill. Let me go after them. But what does that mean for you, the job seeker? Well, number one, maybe you want to consider navigating your career towards those growing fields. So for instance, maybe you were like me, you were a political science major and you're wondering, what am I going to do with this degree? Well, guess what? If you go on LinkedIn, there's a platform called LinkedIn Learning, and you can learn 10 of the hottest job paths for free right there on the site. Everything from programming to design to digital marketing, all these jobs of today and tomorrow, all available for free right on LinkedIn. So basically upskill. And then number two, always be thinking about what's going to matter in the future. Maybe LinkedIn profiles will become obsolete. Maybe it'll be a new thing. But one thing that will never be obsolete is the relationships. The fact that you have someone on the inside who wants you to succeed. And so if you're a student or a career changer and you're like, I only have an hour to spend, what's the best use of my time? Investing in getting to know someone new in that space is never a bad investment because it's going to pay off in the short term, but definitely in the long term.
And how do people, employers and employees, how do people deal with entrepreneurship in the whole job search process?
Yeah. So first of all, we've been talking a lot about LinkedIn from the job seeker perspective, but future entrepreneurs out there should know LinkedIn is also for them. So in the same way that you can hang out your digital shingle as a job candidate, you can do that as an entrepreneur and say, hey, I'm offering marketing consulting or accounting services or whatever it might be. And people can actually search for you and find your business right there on LinkedIn. And then from the perspective of, hey, maybe I've done some entrepreneurship, but now I want to get back into the job search world. Well, guess what? You don't have to say, oh my goodness, that was such a weird thing I did starting my own business. Instead, be proud of it. Think about the fact that you developed all these skills like leadership, project management. You executed these incredible campaigns. List all of those skills on your profile so you get credit for all the great expertise you built up while you ran your own venture.
I think that's really good advice that you were able to provide us. And I want you to try to come up with one other nugget for us. So if you had to leave our audience with just one final thought about how they can prepare themselves for the job market and get the job that they actually want, what would that advice be?
So there's one big elephant in the room we haven't talked about so far, which is any of these strategies will get you into the interview room. But there's one more strategy to close the deal, which is often the hardest stage. And I think this is especially difficult right now, given that we're all interviewing on Zoom and it's a little unfamiliar to us. Well, guess what? LinkedIn even has a tool for that. And like everything else, it's also free. If you go to the LinkedIn job section, you will see something called interview prep. And what you can do is you can practice answering the most common interview questions, record yourself doing it so you can see what that feels like, and then get feedback straight from LinkedIn's AI on your communication style, your speed of speeching, your voice pitch, even things like filler words. And that way, when the big day arrives, you are ready to knock it out of the park.
Last thing, what can people expect when they actually look at your book, Conquer LinkedIn, Get the Job, and Own Your Future? What can they expect when they actually find that book?
Yeah, the number one thing is practicality. I love self-help books in terms of imagining your future and dreaming big, and that's great. But a lot of times I feel a little empty at the end because I'm like, okay, now what? How do I actually turn this into reality? Our book isn't like that. It's like, hey, you've got a job that you really want. Let's go and get it step by step by step. And we'll guide you all the way into that promised land.
And how can people get their hands on this book?
Yeah, so you can check us out on thejobinsiders.com. We have links to a variety of different bookstores, and we have a free LinkedIn profile grader to make sure that your profile is ready for prime time.
We would definitely like to thank our guest today, career coach and hiring manager, Jeremy Schieffeling, co-author of the book, Linked, Conquer LinkedIn, Get the Job, Own Your Future, for coming on our show today.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Good luck to all your listeners, Kevin.
Once again, my name is Kevin Boston Hill, and thank you all for listening to Instruction Discussion right here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.